I love lists, all kinds of lists. To-do lists for all the chores and tasks that need to get done around the house. Sometimes I keep the lists even after I've checked everything off to remind myself of everything that I've accomplished. To buy lists, right? Shopping lists, grocery lists, school supply lists. Move it down. Okay. That way, I'm much more likely to get all the things that I need and less likely to accumulate a bunch of stuff that I'm not supposed to have. I also really enjoy lists for healthy reminders. So, for example, the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Some of you might know them. This is a list of 4 agreements you can make with yourself that can reset how you experience and move through the world. That list is: be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. And always do your best. It's pretty straightforward. Not really. It was transformative for me, that particular list, and I really love the word impeccable. Here's another list that's been useful to me. It's a list of different ways that people prefer to give and receive love. This is a list of the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman, and those are physical touch, gifts, acts of service, words of affirmation, and quality time. And what a wonderful contribution this is to help us understand that my efforts to show caring and support will best be understood as such if I can offer them in a way that the other person is best able to perceive them. And what if I can recognize that someone else is indeed showing me love in the best way that they know to do, even if it isn't in the form that is most preferred by me. So if I speak quality time and the other person speaks gifts, we can both be happier when we understand that those are one another's love languages, instead of being sad about the pieces that we feel are missing. Anyway, those are 2 of my favorite lists. But there's another list in particular that speaks to me very powerfully. And this list is inscribed in a building, on the wall of a building in my neighborhood. And my feet seem to take me there almost on a daily basis, out of my way to go by and reread the list. So I already know it by heart. I've known it by heart for years. But my feet seem to think it's important that I read it anyway. And that list comes from a verse in the biblical Old Testament book of Micah. It's in chapter 6, verse 8. And it reads, "To do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with thy God." 12 words, I counted them. 12 small words, 12 mighty words. So the whole verse reads like this: "He hath showed thee, O man, what is good. What doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God?" So this morning, I want to talk for a little bit about why this particular list speaks to me so strongly, and how, for me, it connects my interest in nonviolence with the things that I love about unity. So in this list, with these 12 words, Micah is given a summary of what is required to live a good life. And here are the words that come to my mind when I think of what is a good life. How do I define good? Here's some: a decent life, a righteous life, a fair life, a healthy life, a joyful life, a fulfilling life. And it seems doable at first blush. Nice, neat list, only 3 things on it. Turns out that I'm finding it a bit harder to be clear about exactly how to do this from time to time. So, first, I want to unpack the 12 words, or at least tell you how they strike me. And then I want to connect them to my understanding of NVC, that's short for nonviolent communication, and the unity teaching about the power of words. So, to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with thy God. So firstly, I see that all the phrases are completely action-packed. Do, love, walk. There's not a lot of passivity there. Verbs, you gotta love the power of verbs. It means that living a good life is about action, not inaction. And it's about decisions, not indecision. So to do, to me, it means that justice in my own life and behavior is arrived through choices and actions that I make knowingly. I cannot unwittingly act justly. I can act unwittingly, and I may be fortunate that sometimes there are no harmful consequences. But that's just getting lucky, I think. Maybe not. But for me, to do justly requires that I remember to think carefully about what I say and do in a given situation, and that I choose well. In life, there are times when events are big enough or intense enough that they prompt us to halt and consider. But many of the important moments in life, when I'm called to do justly, are little, small, everyday moments that become the backdrop for a whole relationship. So to do means to think, or choose, or decide, or act, for me, from a loving consciousness. To love mercy, to love. To me, this means that mercy is the continuous pursuit of love. And I like to remind myself that love is not just any old verb, it's truly an action word, because to love means so much more than to simply experience a feeling. That's because in order to experience love, there's stuff we gotta do to get there. And when we get there, there's stuff we gotta do to keep it. How many people in the world have made this mistake, right? The thought that love is a feeling that just descends upon us, if we're lucky. I think love is a decision, over and over and over again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. So it's work, it's good work, it's worthy work, and it's worthwhile work. Okay, and to walk. No way to get around the walking part. No spiritual sitting on the sofa. You gotta move. I don't know about you, but by far the most beautiful and rewarding walks that I've ever been on do involve some hills, a few thorny and scratchy parts, some loose rocks, and maybe even a surprise rain shower or scary animal. Sometimes I certainly don't feel up for the hard parts of a walk. And in truth, sometimes I take a pause or a detour. But going backwards usually doesn't make any sense. So one way or another, I have to walk forwards. And so I walk. And usually I get stronger and more sure-footed as I go. And actually, a little more humble too. So the act of walking and the recognition of being on a journey help promote sincere humility. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so what about the adverbs? I like adverbs. Justly. Sometimes what is just can seem fuzzy, right? Goodness knows, people argue about justice and what is just. Death penalty, justified retaliation, sanctions or counter-sanctions, public and welfare policies, timeouts, who gets what and how much. There are definitely times that I struggle to see what is just or right or fair, or what is the just or right or fair thing for me to do. Mercy. We have lots of debates about that as well in our society, and sometimes in my family, about what counts as merciful in any given situation. But it helps me to think about mercy as a synonym for compassion and empathy. And those words, to me, have to do with a kind of openness to understanding and a willingness to be open. The words don't negate the need for and the importance of taking responsibility or being accountable, but they stipulate that these concepts be moderated by a kind of gentleness and a willingness to see another's perspective or experience as valid. Humbly. That one I'm pretty clear on, and it's not my favorite. Why does the least appealing have to be the most clear? I don't know. Sometimes I struggle with words, but when I meet someone who's truly humble, it seems so clear, even if it's really hard to describe. And when I manage to be truly humble, it is singularly distinct from feeling shy or insecure. It's one of those things you know when you're there or when you're not. So to walk humbly, to me, means to at once be confident about what I do know and what I am capable of and what I can do, and simultaneously to be cognizant of the limits of that knowledge and ability. And so while there's no belittling of my ability or competence, there is a tempering wisdom that recognizes the current capacity and the yet untapped potential. Both. And then there are the words, thy God. And for me, they mean my God as in the God of my own understanding. And you can decide what they mean to you, and I won't talk about the God of my understanding this morning, but that's what that means to me. But the exhortation was not just to walk humbly. It was to walk humbly with thy God. And I believe that this is a reiteration and affirmation of the core concept of humility. Be truly humble, not falsely humble for show, or falsely humble through self-denigration, but be humble in the face of something far bigger than yourself, or the limits of a situation, or any self-effacing language. We are under construction. Much is already done, and it is good. And there's more to go. And that is wonderful. So embrace it with joy. So the verse says, do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. And how does it all relate to nonviolence and nonviolent communication and unity? So here's how it weaves together in my mind so far. Nonviolence and nonviolent communication, to me, are very parallel to some core unity teachings. And for me, nonviolence and nonviolent communication are strategies that help me to figure out how to execute and achieve Micah's list for living a good life. So how do I do justly and love mercy and walk humbly? When I'm in doubt, I look to nonviolence. Okay, so nonviolence as described by Susanne Allen, who is the founder of the K-State Campaign for Nonviolence and is the architect of bringing the season for nonviolence to Manhattan many, many years ago. She says that at the most fundamental level, nonviolence is about healthy, sustainable balance in any given system. And systems can be relationships, families, partnerships, but they also include our environment, our political systems. Those are all different levels of systems. In any nonviolent relationship, there's no imbalance of power, there's no abuse of position or resources, and it means that everyone in the system is better off in the long run if we take good care of all parts or members of the system. In other words, we're all connected. Sounds familiar, right? Every Sunday, we affirm our oneness with each other in our welcome statement and in our prayers. And nonviolence also means an active decision to respond to violence, any kind of violence, not with inaction, but with positive considered action. And most importantly, it means stepping out of an either-or mentality. So there's a wonderful quote from a Rumi poem that says, "Out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there." To me, this is a suggestion that there exists a possibility for connection and mutual caring if I'm willing to see people in a more holistic way. Now, nonviolent communication, as it's described and organized by the late Marshall Rosenberg, involves a list. Yay! So that list goes like this. Separate judgment from observation. Recognize feelings, identify needs, and make requests. So there's a whole bunch of nuance that goes into this. Excuse me. And I've spent 14 years studying and practicing, and I learn more about how to do it better every single day. Kids are excellent teachers. But I've learned a few things. So the first part, to separate judgment from observation, means to be able to isolate and describe that which is neutrally perceptible from that which is some kind of interpretation, assumption, or deduction on our part. So this is really, really hard to do. We're really used to conflating those things together in all of our relationships. And it takes a lot of practice to begin to sort them back out. So I'll give a couple of examples. Those kids are so rude. That might be a thought you might have if you have kids in your life, occasionally. If you start to unpack that a little bit and really try to get at what is it that you actually simply observed, you might end up with, perhaps, the kids did not make eye contact when they entered the house or when I said hello. Another thought that might be worth unpacking. So-and-so is kind of lazy and uncharitable. So if you distill that a little bit and peel it apart, you might end up with an observation that looks like this. For the last 3 potlucks, so-and-so brought 1 box of store-bought cookies. I hope you can hear how the separation of the judgment from the observation innately opens up a sense of broader possibilities. Just doing that creates space. All of a sudden it becomes possible. Maybe there's another way to see those kids or so-and-so. So to me, there's quite a bit of doing in that step. I have to think very hard, and I see a great deal of effort towards justice in that step. So in fact, I think that if I'm going to have any hope of doing justly, I had best start by not making assumptions, interpretations, or faulty deductions. I had best get really clear on what it is that I may have observed. Just that. And then, if I shall seek to understand more fully what my observation really means, it behooves me to do some asking and listening. Notice more action words. So I want to call your attention for just a second to your bulletin. There's a picture on the inside on the right. There's a picture. There are a bunch of little old post office mailboxes. The quote, it goes like this: "Judgments place others in boxes. In fact, they place those who judge in boxes." Those boxes are pretty small, and they are certainly well defined. So the quote comes from Thomas D. Anson-Borg's book, Being Genuine, and that's a fabulous treatise on his own journey with and work with nonviolent communication. And as a priest working with young people, he can speak knowingly about the detrimental effects of judging people and how this limits them, our view of them, and keeps us locked into that same perspective. How many of you can recall words of judgment spoken to you? Maybe even by someone who loves you. Those words can really linger. Sometimes they haunt us. My point is that words are mighty, mighty, and that the words I choose are powerful. And when we use limiting language, we limit ourselves, our lives, and our relationships. And there's no getting around it. Labels and judgments of people are limiting every time. It's a core unity teaching, right? That words have immense creative power. And whether the words are spoken aloud or simply held in our minds, they shape what comes next. They certainly shape what I say and do next. I'll never give a talk at Unity Spiritual Center of Manhattan. As opposed to, so far I have not given a talk at Unity Spiritual Center of Manhattan. Or even, I think someday I'd like to give a talk at Unity Spiritual Center of Manhattan. Those of you guys who've known me a long time know it's been a journey with words. So in equal measure, our words can create possibility or have the power to limit what we're able to see and understand. Be impeccable in your choice of words. So the words of judgments, assumptions, and interpretations hinder me from doing justly, because almost certainly I'm not truly seeing another perspective, another interpretation, another rationale that may actually be valid. And choosing words of observation and separating out the judgment can help me to consider other needs that I may have been unaware of, needs or fair and valid interests that simply may not have occurred to me yet. So that same piece of separating judgment from observation is also essential for this business of loving mercy. How can I embrace empathy and compassion when I'm filled with judgment? I don't know if you've ever tried it. It just doesn't work. At least not for me. I would argue, I think, backed up fully by Rosenberg as well, that the reverse is true. When I'm able to be truly compassionate with another human being, the degree to which I judge them is instantly and intrinsically reduced. That's not to say that I would agree with everything they say or do, or that I would support and condone everything they think, but I'm far more able to make the distinction between the things that the person says, thinks, or does, and the unassailable worthiness and dignity of the person themselves, and perhaps even my love for them. So the next two steps of NVC, to recognize feelings and to identify needs, further serve the purpose of developing deeper understanding and fostering compassion. In other words, to love mercy. And how do you get to those feelings and needs? There's a lot of asking questions in a really kind and authentically curious way, not snarky, and deep listening. Often, in a conflict, when you first ask someone about their feelings and needs, what you hear are their judgments, assumptions, or interpretations, and so many limiting words. And in NVC practice, we learn to speak and listen in a different way. We slowly learn to choose more authentic and accurate words to describe what is happening in us, and we learn to listen behind limiting statements to get to the more true feelings and needs that provide a far more positive and complete and accurate understanding of a person. So, real listening is anything but a passive activity. It requires some seriously active attention, and that is loving mercy, and it's also doing justly. So, for me, it just keeps weaving together. So the act of recognizing that there may be more to be understood in a given situation, the willingness to hold still, to ask or listen, and then to really, really hear, is also an inherently humble act, because it holds implicitly the understanding of the possibility of my own error in perception. This understanding, without any affixed self-recrimination, right? So no, oh, I should have known, or I should have thought, or if only I had done. None of that. Just the understanding is a beautiful, simple opening of possibility. It's a possibility for a fresh and more complete knowing, and for a renewed chance at a connection. And it is a walk, a journey. It's a path to travel. A path of jointly recognizing our own beauty and worth, and simultaneously holding the knowledge that we're not done yet, we're learning and growing, and this may be such a moment. So for me, the list of 4 parts to cultivate a language for life, and that is what Marshall Rosenberg calls nonviolent communication. That list of 4 parts helps to provide me with a cornerstone for how to do better with the 3-part list given to Micah about how to live a good life. And I realize that I haven't said anything about the 4th part of NVC, making requests, and so maybe someday I'll devote a whole talk just to the art of making requests. We'll see. Did I say that out loud? Over the years in Unity, I've heard the message about the creative power of words in many different iterations. It's a message that we hear brought to us frequently. And indeed, the core Unity principle that we create our experience based on our thoughts, I think rests squarely on the recognition of word power. Because what are our thoughts except the words that we speak to ourselves? Our thoughts are comprised of the words we choose. The Austrian-British philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." We had a lot of fun debating that in freshman English class. But the salient point is that with the words we choose, we can stick others and ourselves in little boxes or drawers, or by conscientiously choosing new words, we can open those boxes up, hop out, look around, and consider how else we might be able to make sense of what's happening. Possibilities present themselves where maybe none were visible before. Sometimes these are moments that we call epiphanies. And really, we don't have to wait for them to come to us. We can use nonviolent communication to free our hearts and minds and cultivate compassion. And we can create our own epiphanies by choosing words that help us to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. Thank you.